I'm here with my friends JC and the Thunderous One. We're going to be doing part 3 on the Fabian Society. Now, of course, this is a 140-year-old, highly respected think tank, very influential in the Labour Party. Every single Labour Prime Minister has been a member of the Fabian Society, and many of their ideas, of their papers, have become British government policy. So these men are the architects, these men and women are the architects of Britain's social structure, its economy, and so many other institutions that affect the life of the average UK resident. And yeah, we're going to learn a little bit more about them today. We're going to see a little bit more into their ideas, their founders. Remember, they came out of the Fellowship of the New Life, a movement that wanted to perfect the personalities, the character of these people. They were designed to create the perfect moral attitude. And of course, then they wanted political power. They founded the Fabian Society. We have so far discovered these people were sexual deviants. They were all kinds of sexual degenerates. They were all sorts of dysfunctional people. Yep. And we're going to learn a little bit more about them again today from their own words, their own writings. And yeah, I think it's going to shock you again. So guys, welcome. Thunderous, how are you doing?
Hi everybody. Hi Lloyd. Hi JC.
JC, you with us?
I am here. I think we lost Thunderous.
No, Thunderous is here. No, Thunderous just said hello.
Okay, so yeah, hi everyone. Thank you, Lloyd, for this amazing series. I'm glad to actually be here and contribute to this political interference series, which is amazing.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah, so greetings from Canada, from Bob Katie, Fabian Colony. Yeah, so you know what? If you guys want, let me know in the chat if you want me to do a follow-up to this series once I finish this one. Hopefully today. I've got 28 slides to go, because the Fabians are responsible for significant influence in American politics, in North American politics. They've created who knows how many different organizations that have copied their ideas or that they've influenced, and they have embedded themselves in, shall we say, American politics as well. And yeah, it's something that we perhaps should investigate further. And I was asked, are there any links to, for instance, Satanism, Crowley, things of that type? Well, you know what? Once you start looking into, say, L. Ron Hubbard, and what was the religion that L. Ron Hubbard created again? Guys, please remind me.
Scientology.
Scientology. Thank you, Thunderous. Yeah, once you start looking into L. Ron Hubbard, you make a straight line to Crowley, Satanism, Theosophy, occultism, and yeah, and things just get really interesting. It's really the same set of bad ideas recycled and recycled and recycled. And these people all turn out to be all kinds of, once again, deviants. So yeah, anything you want to mention before I continue, before I dive right in?
Yeah, I just think people could look at the material that you've presented and that we've been discussing for the past couple of weeks, and maybe do some of their own research and look at that period in history, pre-World War I, where all of this sort of stuff, you mentioned Aleister Crowley, the books, you know, Darwinism, Eugenics, the Fabian Society. I learned last week for the first time about UPF, which is ultra-processed food, which had its roots 150 years ago. There seems to be a lot of things that took place in the past to get us where we are today.
No, lots of things. We're going to look at some of that today. So guys, if you enjoy the content, if you like what I do here, please do subscribe, do tell people about it, and do give it a like. I believe when you give it a like, it means that the YouTube algorithm shares this out to 10 more people. So please do give it a like. So yeah, let's just jump in. We ended last time on this slide. This is the Richardson lethal chamber. This was supposed to be for the painless extinction of lower animal life. It turns out that the lower animal life that these people want to extinguish is you. And of course, this, yeah, go on.
So I just lost your sound there for a moment, Lloyd.
Okay. Yeah, well, so this is the painless extinction of animal life in the Richardson lethal chamber, and the people that they want to extinguish, the lower animal life, happens to be generally us. So, and of course, this is H.G. Wells. He happened to be on Time magazine's cover which is fantastic. So I won't finish this. I won't repeat this slide. I'll just jump into the next slide on H.G. Wells. He's the father of science fiction and, of course, also ethical murder, because it's okay when they do it. So he'd spoken previously of it's important for them to organize society like a garden, to grow the roses and to terminate the weeds. Now, how the removal of the weeds and foulness could take place was explained by Wells in 1901, and he stated that he not only supported forced sterilization, we don't like you, we don't think you should have kids, we're going to sterilize you. And yeah, he also hoped that in the future society, the new republic, as he called it, a higher form of ethics would develop to support the use of euthanasia. So in other words, we should kill people that we don't feel contribute to society or that are of no benefit, people that are a net drain. And a higher form of ethics, better morality, would allow us to make the decision to kill the people we don't like. So yeah, that's highly moral. Yeah, well, the Freemasons are, yeah, they love to, assert that they're the nice guys. But he writes here, these men of the new republic, you know, your new technocratic masters, the ethical system which will dominate the world state. And when he says world state, he means one world government, right? Will be shaped primarily to favor the procreation of what is fine and efficient and beautiful in humanity. Of course, they are the arbiters of the meaning of fine, beautiful, and efficient. And you will have beautiful and strong bodies, clear and powerful minds, and a growing body of knowledge. And of course, we have to check the procreation of base and servile types. Ask yourself, are you part of the Aryan master race? You're okay. Are you black like me? Yeah, no kids for you, buddy. Thanks. We're gonna have to, we're gonna have to sterilize you. In fact, we might have to do a little bit more than that. So when it came to a multitude of contemptible and silly creatures, the men of the new republic will have little pity. They're going to have very little pity and less benevolence. The men of the new republic will not be squeamish in facing or inflicting death. So they're going to be like jihadis. They're willing to kill or be killed. Very interesting. You see, they're willing to kill or be killed for whatever they happen to worship. And they will have an ideal that will make killing worth the while. That sounds very moral and ethical. Do you guys have any thoughts on this?
Well, they've kind of sold it to the public.
Thunderous, your audio is terrible.
Okay, let me come out and come back into the stream again. Okay.
Okay. JC, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, this reminds me of Star Wars when Palpatine says, we need to destroy all of the Jedi and then we will have peace. And this actually sounds like this, like, okay, in order to have a very peaceful society, we need to go and kill a lot of people because then we will have peace. And it's like, but you are leaving out that it is the people doing the murder, the ones that are going to be in control of the new society. You're never going to have peace. It feels almost like a pyramid scheme of evil.
It's also jihad. They're going to form their caliphate by, this is jihad. If you think about it, it's no different. It's structured identically. It's the same idea. So now these men would ensure that undesirable elements were removed from society. This euthanasia of the weak and sensual is possible. In other words, wir können es schaffen. We can do this. This is something we can achieve. We can remove through euthanasia, through voluntary dying, the weak. So I hope you guys are not the weak. Let's all hope we're not the weak. And Wells declared then, adding that the killings could be carried out humanely by means of an opiate. So H.G. Wells was saying that we should carry out the killing of the weak, and if we can get them to voluntarily kill themselves, that'll be great. And of course, the killing should be carried out humanely by means of drugs. So yeah, Thunderous, any thoughts?
No, I think we're seeing evidence of that today with certain laws and legislations that have passed through several secular lands. So for people who are thinking that this cannot be sort of like morally put forward in a palatable manner, I've said it time and again about state-assisted suicide and full-term abortions. So we're already seeing a manifestation of this ideology. We're just waiting for it to be implemented in another manner, or a next stage, as it were. It wouldn't surprise me, if we get to the point of Logan's Run, where they consider human beings should only live till about 33 years old, and after that, you serve no purpose to society.
Yeah, no, these ideas tend to mutate, but they tend to follow a certain recipe. Right, so the final solution, let's talk about a Nobel Prize winner, because the Nobel Prize is given to the best in society. So the co-founder of the London School of Economics and Politics and the New Statesman, the designer of the Fabian window, really wanted to cleanse the human race. I did this slide last time, I think it's worth repeating. George Bernard Shaw, in the lecture to the Eugenics Education Society, reported in the Daily Express, March 4th, 1910. A part of eugenic politics would finally land us in an extensive use of the lethal chamber. Many people would have to be put out of existence simply because it wastes other people's time to look after them. The moment we face it, frankly, we are driven to the conclusion that the community has a right to put a price on the right to live in it. And if they are not fit to live, kill them. In a decent human way, of course. You must kill people nicely. Murder them, but in the nicest possible way. These people are so generous, right? And therefore we are driven to prescribe the lethal chamber, which was supposed to be for the lower animals like dogs. But yeah, it turns out it's good for humans too. Right, so let me reshare my screen. I'm going to stop sharing and then reshare because I need to play a short 1-minute video. And Thunderous, could you mute yourself, please? Because there's lots of screen noise coming through. Okay, let me play this. This is George Bernard Shaw, right? This is an interview he conducted. This was public, right? This was recorded. And let's see, you can see this on YouTube, but let's actually play this. Hopefully you guys can hear this.
I object to all punishment whatsoever. I don't want to punish anybody. But there are an extraordinary number of people whom I want to kill. Not in any unkind or personal spirit, but it must be evident to all of you. You must all know half a dozen people at least, who are no use in this world, who are more trouble than they are worth. And I think it would be a good thing to make everybody come before a properly appointed board, just as he might come before the income tax commissioners, and say every 5 years or every 7 years, just put him there and say, sir, or better, now will you be kind enough to justify your existence? If you can't justify your existence, if you're not pulling your weight in central vote, if you're not producing as much as you consume, or perhaps something more, then clearly we cannot use the reorganization of our society for the purpose of keeping you alive, because your life does not benefit us, and it can't be a very much use.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to reshare without the audio. So give me 1 second. I did mute my mic. I eventually switched it off. So I disabled my mic completely. Sorry about that, guys, but let's have a look at what he said here, right? So he says here, I don't want to punish anybody, but there are an extraordinary number of people who I want to kill. Not in any unkind or personal spirit. He wants to just kill you in the nicest possible way. You must know people who are no use and more trouble than they are worth. I think, yeah, like leftists think Republicans and conservatives and Christians are those kinds of people. I think it would be a good thing to make everybody come before a properly appointed board and say every 5 years or every 7 years, just put him there and say, sir or madam, now will you be kind enough to justify your existence? So yeah, and if you can't, of course, then they need to say, well, I'm sorry, but you produce less than you consume. In fact, you are no use to the society. We think we're going to put you in the lethal chamber. Thanks. Have a nice day. Now, in 1938, 5 years after the National Socialist takeover in Germany, Shaw wrote in a letter to Beatrice Webb, one of the major co-founders of the Fabian Society, "I think we ought to tackle the Jewish question by admitting the right of the state to make eugenic experiments by weeding out any strains they think undesirable, but insisting they should do it as humanely as they can afford to." So we should kill the Jews, but humanely, right? And we should kill anyone that can't, justify their existence, or anyone that we think is using more resources than they provide. You guys, what do you think of all of that?
I think if that was put to a vote instead of a panel, the politicians will be the first ones to go.
I think the difficulty you've got with this is the panel themselves are not going to be subject to the every 5-year justification for your existence. So they're the ones who are arbitrarily making the decision as to who comes before the panel. Okay, so let's look at every 5 years. Now, the difficulty with every 5 years is that technology changes and advances every 5 years. Sometimes it takes great leaps, and sometimes it's very slow incremental moves. So the problem is you have to change the parameters as to what you justify as legal existence. So the parameters that you start with 1930 as an example are going to be different by 1940 because technology would have changed. So
they will also, if they think that you are not just a net drain by their definition of what's a net drain, but also if they think you are undesirable as they define undesirable, then, well, it's the lethal chamber for you, right? It's all subjective from their perspective.
There's the point. So I was just going with if you're using more than you contribute, so that could be technology based. But then if you're looking at it from the perspective of, say, intelligence or the color of your skin, or these things, those parameters can change as well, because you see, they could look at, say, the lower dregs of society as they see it as being manual labor, whereas things become more automated, there isn't the requirement for manual labor anymore, and we're seeing that evidence today in our world. So you can imagine if these laws were implemented, the state of humankind would be dwindling down. And it would be, I remember a scene in a movie, it's Magnum Force, one of the Dirty Harry movies. There was an interesting point in there about vigilantism, where the Harry Callahan character says, pretty soon you'll be killing people for their dog pissing on your lawn. And I thought it was a great comment to make, because it shows you when you start giving human beings the justification to act out subjectively what they think is right or wrong, where does it end? And I think this is a terrible example of where would it end if you let these people rule the roost.
Yeah, it's Crowleyism and Satanism. So, right. So what else does George Bernard Shaw says? Well, he says this famous line, kill, 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 kill them. In 1948, after the liberations of the death camps, after the photographs, after the trials at Nuremberg, Shaw wrote of these quote-unquote undesirables, reorganize their lives for them, and do not speak foolishly about their liberty. So for the Americans out there, he wasn't fond of American liberty. He thought that was stuff that's old-fashioned and they should fix that. But it may be asked whether they are to be allowed not only to read the newspapers, but also to marry and breed. So you need to be given permission to read, because you can't have you educated. And also you need to ask nicely if you can marry and breed, because you're one of the lower classes, right? Yes, the ungovernables, the ferocious, the conscienceless, the idiots, the self-centered myopes and morons, what of them? Do not punish them. Kill, 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 kill them. The most amiably soft-hearted monarch confronted with a death warrant must sign it or abdicate as unfit to reign. So yeah, lovely guy, wonderful guy, definitely not on a jihad to kill the unfit, as he defines them. Nothing in common with people like the little mustache guy or anyone like Stalin. Yeah, any thoughts before I go on?
What this makes me think is that the one thing that he should have said is like, okay, what do we do with psychos who want to kill? Those are the people that now we would see if someone is a psycho who just wants to get rid of people, that person cannot be in society. It needs to be in prison because they are going to hurt people. But this guy seems to have been there telling people, no, 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 I'm just want to kill people, but it's not because I'm a psycho, it's because I'm a very good guy. So we just need to kill those guys. It's like, but this is the sort of language that should get you in prison for a lifetime.
Yeah, yeah. But this is the kind of language that forges a society that becomes a major political force that runs the UK government. Yeah,
And-
this was, yeah. Go on.
And I think if you was to do a psychological profile of this kind of thinking, of this kind of mindset, then what you're dealing with is sociopathic people.
Yep. No, clearly. So this is a piece called Capital Punishment, published in the Atlantic Monthly in 1948. So this is a link to the article. You can actually, it's easy to find, just Capital Punishment, G.B. Shaw. All right, so no Irish, no Jews, Muslims are fine, of course. This is Fabian track number 131, The Decline in the Birth Rate by Sidney Webb. I've gone to the Fabian website, looked for certain. Wow. Something happened there. Guys, are we back? Hey guys, are we back? Something weird happened there.
I'm back, and okay, Thunderous is back as well.
Thunderous, welcome back. Sorry, we got kicked. So we're back. Yeah, so, okay, so on the Fabian Society website, several of these tracks are missing. They're not listed, you can't find them. So clearly they removed what they find is embarrassing. It's like these embarrassing deeds that are disappearing from Muslim websites. So this one's called The Decline in the Birth Rate, track number 131. Price is only 1 penny, and it's published in March 1907. Sidney Webb, who wrote Labour's Constitution, right, and co-founded the London School of Economics in 1907, in Fabian track 131, The Decline of the Birth Rate, wrote the following. In Great Britain at this moment, children are being freely born to the Irish Roman Catholics and the Polish, Russian and German Jews on the one hand. So it's like, oh my God, how can these people have children? Like, what is going on here? We cannot allow this. And to the thriftless and the irresponsible, largely the casual laborers and the other denizens of the one-room tenements of our great cities on the other. This can hardly result in anything but national deterioration, or as an alternative, in this country, gradually falling the Irish and the Jews. Thunderous, we can hear you fine. You're making noise there. Thunderous, you can hear me? Right, so yeah, he doesn't want the country gradually falling to the Irish and the Jews. Any thoughts, JC, before I move?
No, I'm good.
So I think we can get the idea of what kind of people we're dealing with and the kind of mindset we're dealing with. Welcome back, Thunderous.
Do apologize, guys. I appear to be suffering a tech issue.
Yeah, so just be careful about making noise and, so yeah. So any thoughts or response to what I just had previously, Thunderous? All of this?
Sorry, no comment.
Okay, so this is The Guardian, right? H.G. Wells gave a glimpse into his flavor of utopia. Remember, utopia is the Greek word that means nowhere. In other words, it's fictitious, it's fabricated, it's a place that cannot exist. This is the kind of fake, perfect paradise that people want to create. So, when he wrote in 1901 that those swarms of black and brown and dirty white and yellow people that failed to be efficient would have to die out and disappear. So let me see, the swarms of black and brown and dirty white and yellow people that are not efficient would need to disappear. He also produced long screeds on Jews. However, according to Science's most elite magazine, Nature, Wells embodied the essence of the scientific method. So H.G. Wells wasn't a psychopath or a Nazi. No, he was the scientific man. So, yeah. H.G. Wells, of course, was a Fabian member from 1903 to 1908, and he was a founding member of the British Eugenics Society. Good guy, in other words. In 1901, in anticipations of the reaction of mechanical and scientific progress upon human life and thought, which was a non-fiction bestseller, a book he called the keystone of his life's work. This was his magnum opus or something, Wells wrote. And for the rest, these swarms of black and brown and dirty white and yellow people who do not come into the new needs of efficiency, like society has to be efficient. And if you want efficient, well, you need to go into the lethal chamber. Well, the world is a world and not a charitable institution. And I take it they will have to go. The whole tenor and meaning of the world, as I see it, is that they have to go. How? Well, we've already got the lethal chamber. That's his idea of how they're going to go. So, yeah. And then there is a guy called William Beveridge. Now, Beveridge wrote the Beveridge Report, which is the blueprint for the welfare state in the UK that you guys love so much. With the human Rights Charter, the European Human Charter of Human Rights, the EUCHR, you guys love so much. And, you cannot deport murderers, rapists, frauds, thieves because the kid likes chicken nuggets from Kentucky in the UK and would suffer if they were sent to eat them in a different country. Of course, he wrote the blueprint for the NHS, Social Security, the safety net, etc., etc. His name is on buildings across the country. Great guy. He was a member of the Eugenics Society. He sat on its consultative council until the late 1950s and died in 1963. This is an image taken shortly before his death. Poor guy must have had some sort of crazy cancer. Right, so eugenics as UK government policy. So, 16th of February 1943, the House of Commons debates the Beveridge Report. On the same day, he went to the Mansion House to deliver the Galton Lecture to the Eugenic Society. So he switches between the government and the Eugenic Society, because clearly he's taking eugenics ideas into government. Remember, these people are the deep state, the administrators that run the government. The title of this speech he gave was Eugenic Aspects of Children's Allowances in the Eugenics Review 34, page 117. So, the architect of the welfare state presented his blueprint to the Eugenic Society and told them that this served their purposes on the same day that Parliament was debating the policy. So they introduced eugenics into UK government policy. So this is not charitable, because they said the world is not charitable, but this is eugenics applied to the state. The Children's Allowance Scheme had been developed within the Eugenic Society with two aims: to encourage educated professional classes to have more children and limiting children born to poor households. Now, the Eugenic Society itself didn't disappear. It renamed itself several times. It became the Voluntary Euthanasia Society, and in 2006 became Dignity in Dying. Any thoughts, guys?
Just thinking about on the previous slide, that when we see what is going on in the UK with this welfare state, that it starts to make sense why, when people are saying you have to start deporting people, you have to close the borders, and the answer from the government is no, we can't. We cannot do anything about this, because laws. But it looks like the reason that they are not sending people back or closing the borders is because their policy is basically prohibits them from doing so. They're set up on a system that needs to allow for that to happen. It's bizarre.
Yeah, some kind of, who knows what it is, but clearly. Also, Beveridge was mentored by the Webbs, right, within the Fabian Society. Let's go to George Orwell. So he worked as a researcher at Beveridge on Beatrice Webb's 1909 Minority Report, the one that became the welfare state blueprint. The Fabians then made him director of the London School of Economics in 1919. So the pipeline runs from Fabian circles into eugenics, into the government, and back again. One man saw all of this from the inside. George Orwell was a democratic socialist. In other words, just a regular commie with a nicer name. He fought in Spain He was never a conservative. He was never a Fabian, and he was never fooled by any of this. So in The Road to Wigan Pier, written in 1937, he wrote, the Coles, the Webbs, the Strachys, etc. are not exactly proletarian writers, right? That most middle-class socialists, while theoretically pining for a classless society, cling like glue to their miserable fragments of social prestige. These are champagne socialists. These are people who talk about the people and actually want to be the masters. So he saw a technocratic socialism, which is socialism planned by experts for the people without the people. So these people are planning to run your life without you having a say in it. They'll take your taxes, they'll set your policy, and they don't care what you think because they believe they should know, they should have the power to do whatever they want and that you should just listen to them. They have the right to impose their will, their views, their vision on you against your will. And yeah, so he saw this technocratic socialism as a path to exactly what he spent his life warning against. Any thoughts before I move on?
They don't seem very nice people at all.
Yeah, definitely not. Definitely not the nicest of people. So, praising Stalin, the founders of the organization that has shaped British democratic socialism, of course, praised Stalinist Russia, and they denied the famine that killed millions, the Holodomor in the Ukraine. In 1935, Beatrice Webb published Soviet Communism, a New Civilization. Note the question mark here. It's over 1,000 pages, based largely on materials provided by the Soviet embassy in London. So they wrote Soviet Communism, a New Civilization, basically propaganda provided to them by the Soviets. In 1937, with the Great Terror at its height, when Stalin executed an estimated 680,000 people, the Webbs published a second edition, but they removed the question mark. It became Soviet Communism, a New Civilization. No longer a question, but now a statement. Because I guess they liked the fact that he was willing to just, kill to bring about his vision of a perfect society. In all social history, they wrote, there has been no such a colossal and so exciting an experiment, making up what is the biggest integrated social organization in the world. This was their praise for the USSR. Of course, you see here the first copy of the book, A New Civilization, question mark, and then no more question mark. And then George Bernard Shaw wrote in 1931, were I 18 years of age, I would settle in Russia. It is a country which is being managed for the benefit of its people. Yeah, any thoughts before I go on?
Yeah, with this look, I've met, you can probably correct me on this, but I've met quite a few Polish people. I thought that they would not have much love for the Germans, but what I found is that they absolutely despised the Russians. They had these because they lived under communist Russia. So when we're in the West and you have these kids going, oh, communism is super fun, it's like, don't tell that to a Polish person because you will be in trouble. They have lived it. And it's and I think it's illegal to even try to use any propaganda, Soviet propaganda or anything like this in Poland. Am I right about that?
Yeah, no, that's an issue. Yeah. So yeah, they hate communism because they lived under it. They know how deadly it was. Right. Let's have a look at George Bernard Shaw and Stalin. So here we've got a dying George Bernard Shaw, and he's got a picture of Stalin on his mantelpiece right here. Okay, you can't really see it, but there's old Stalin. See right here? He's got Stalin right there, right there in his mantelpiece here. You can see the little mustache over there, but that's good old Stalin on his mantelpiece. He wrote, after a visit to Russia, he said, tomorrow I leave this land of hope and I return to our Western countries, the countries of despair, because the West is bad. It's countries of despair. Hope is in Russia, Soviet Union under Stalin. Yeah, definitely the good guys. He met Stalin for 3 hours. He called him a Georgian gentleman. Shaw signed a letter to the Manchester Guardian denying the Ukrainian famine. because, well, that's what you do when you are a communist, now don't you? At the same time, a Welsh journalist called Gareth Jones was on the ground in Ukraine reporting the mass starvation. At least 5 or 6 million people died, if not double that. All right. So, yeah, the Ukrainians therefore have no love for the Russians. Now, as you know, some people did something. Might be a guy with a mustache who was a failed painter, might be a Georgian guy who took over the Soviet Union, but some people did something. Yeah, I know that. Yeah, Klaus Schwab of the WEF has a statue of Lenin in his office. You can find the picture online. Yeah. Martyrs, you're back?
Yeah, sorry, I've sorted my tech issue out, so I do apologize, guys, if I've been a bit of a nuisance.
Yeah. Anything you want to say before I go?
Well, I was listening to the comments you were making about George Bernard Shaw visiting Stalin and how he came back to England optimistic with what was happening in Russia, but not so much when he hit back in England. It reminded me of a quote in the 70s by three men in the 70s, which was Nixon, David Rockefeller, and Henry Kissinger, that had gone to China and how impressed they were. Maybe you can pull up the quote now. It's certainly just come to my mind now about how impressed they were with the great leap forward by Mao Zedong. It's within the same pattern of thinking that murdering society in order to improve the state of the government is a very sociopathic set of thinking that seems to be manifest in all of secular lands.
Let me see. Now, this could be wrong because I am getting this from a search engine AI, but let's try it. Let's hope it's correct and not hallucinated. Here we go. Writing in the New York Times, August 10, 1973, titled "From a China Traveler," David Rockefeller wrote, "Whatever the price of the Chinese Revolution, it has obviously succeeded not only in producing more efficient, or that word again, efficient, and dedicated administration, but also in fostering high morale and community of purpose. The social experiment in China under Chairman Mao's leadership is one of the most important and successful in human history." And they only had to murder something like 60 million people to do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because if it's, say, for instance, if you persecute people and kill them, then they call it genocide if they're wrong.
Andres, your audio is terrible. You would sound like you're underwater.
I thought I resolved it. Is that any better?
No, it's really tough to hear you. It's like it's wobbling.
I'll just have to come out and go back in again.
Okay, right. I'll continue. So in the third edition in 1941, they had third edition of their book about Russia as a new civilization. They defended the Stalinist purges. So for them, purges are good. The Holodomor killed an estimated 3.5 to 5 million people or more. As I said, I've seen estimates of double that. When Shaw died, the photographs in his mantelpiece included Dzerzhinsky, the founder of the Soviet secret police, because we all need KGB people in our that we admire, I guess, and Lenin and Stalin. In December 1933, at a Fabian lecture reported by the New York Times, Shaw praised Hitler, Mussolini, and Stalin in the same breath. New York Times says here, Shaw heaps praise upon the dictators. While parliaments get nowhere, he says, Hitler, Mussolini, and Stalin do things. And you can see here, Shaw heaps praise upon the dictators. That is at the New York Times, and it's in the archives. It's December 12th, 1933. 10th of December, 1933. Yeah, so the only way to get ahead is to be a dictator, and he praises the dictator for these dictators for getting ahead because they do things, they get things done. So yeah, so now you can see these Fabians, these leading Fabians, the founders of the Fabians, they praised, they loved, they endorsed, they revered, they visited, they befriended the worst dictators of our times. Right. So his justification, of course, for loving people like Stalin, Hitler, Mao, Lenin, and so on, they're trying to get things done, and that's okay. Shaw praises Hitler as an able statesman, But he says he erred by not urging intermarriage with Jews. Now, of course, he wanted intermarriage with Jews because then you see, then they would dilute and eventually eliminate the Jewish gene, because they would intermarry with Europeans, and they would eventually become genetically European, and you'd have no more Jews. This actually was also the recommendation of Malthus, because these people were Malthusian. So he's not getting this out of nowhere. He's actually taking this from Malthus. Although in other examples, he'd stated, yeah, we just need to kill them. So, yeah. Orwell saw this very clearly. He recognized this as power worship, as he said, and a dangerous tendency among the intelligentsia to value ruthless efficiency, that word again, right, over basic human liberty. These people are psychopaths. They think like machines. They have no compassion. They don't want to be compassionate. They just want to run things according to whatever they have in their minds, which is clearly also just, yeah, going to end up killing a lot of people, and has. Yeah, any thoughts before I go on?
Well, I'm actually very shocked about this, because certainly nowadays, anyone who would sing praises about any of those people, we would know those are just crazy individuals, and you shouldn't trust them. These are the bad guys of history.
Yeah,
so
the left loses their minds of and wants to call everybody, you know, like Hitler.
Yes, and at the same time, they try to get the ideologies of these people embedded into politics, but they just call it good. Basically, they are trying to turn good and bad, switch it over, and say, no, we're doing it for the greater good. It's very scary.
Yeah.
And when you consider that this is all under the influence of atheism, and then you have the atheists trying to make the claim that they're the most humane mindset that's ever been conceived against religion, you've only got to look at the influence of atheism for the past 100 years plus to see how malicious, evil, divisive, destructive, and murderous atheism truly is at its core.
Right. So yeah, so the left, these leftists and socialists and eugenicists, for them, tyranny was excused, very easily excused. Mass murder was excused as long as it masqueraded as administrative progress. Right, so Fabian prime ministers, quick look at that. The Fabian Society claims on their own websites, in their own publications, that every Labour prime minister has been a Fabian. Clement Attlee, Harold Wilson, James Callaghan, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown were all affiliated with the Fabian Society. Ramsay MacDonald joined the Fabians in the 1880s. We spoke about them. He sat on their executive from 1894 and became Britain's first Labour PM in 1924. Clement Attlee, Fabian member, taught at the London School of Economics. He won the 1945 landslide. 229 Fabian Society members were elected to Parliament that year. Labour's manifesto was written by Fabian Michael Young, or co-written, shall we say. Harold Wilson, Fabian member and chairman of the Society. 12 of his 20 cabinet members were Fabians. Welcome to the Fabian deep state. And of course, Sadiq Kant. Sorry, I made a mistake. I left the T off at the end of his name. Sadiq Kant served as chairman of the Socialist Fabian Society, remaining on its executive committee. He is a vice president of the Fabian Society. And now you know why he's doing what he's doing. All 7 Labour PMs are Fabians. James Callaghan, Fabian member, every member of his cabinet reportedly belonged to the Society. Tony Blair was a Fabian member, published multiple Fabian pamphlets like The Courage of Our Convictions. So just for those who, these days, what I do see a lot on social media is when you point out something about Islam, when you point out something about jihadis, when you point out something from the Sharia, someone's always going to go and deflect and say, oh yeah, but you need to talk about and they'll mention something about Jews. Of course, they don't want to acknowledge what is evil about the people that they support. It goes against their narrative. These are not people who are trying to be fair and people who are trying to examine the truth of another issue. No, no, no. For them, there's only one evil in the world. And this stuff and these people that we're showing here, they're okay. These mass murderers are okay because they can only blame Jews. None of these are Jews. These are all former Christians. These are all people who were former ministers and people involved in the Church of England. These are all atheists, and of course atheism is squeaky clean because it doesn't believe anything, blah, blah. These are all occultists, theosophists, people who were influenced by Blavatsky, by Crowley, and all sorts of things. So yeah, and these are all prime ministers, respectable people. These are evil people. So yeah, Gordon Brown is a Fabian member. And the whole idea of Bank of England independence, well, that was born from a Fabian pamphlet. It was enacted in his first week as PM, which benefited the Fabian Society. Keir Starmer, former Fabian Executive Committee member, first leader to win while sitting on the committee, and he wrote his political vision as a Fabian pamphlet. Yes, Sadiq Khan is a Fabian too. Any thoughts, guys, before I move on?
Well, yeah, I wanted to mention about the Sadiq Khan. That's actually very scary if he becomes prime minister at one point. But when that comment from Thunderous a moment ago, when he said that the atheism is something that has caused a lot of chaos, Lloyd, I think I saw in one of your shows in the past, I could be wrong, that you showed how many wars have been fought religiously and non-religiously, and something like 90% of them have been by non-religious means. So when we are going more atheism means more war and more of what we are seeing here that the Fabians seems to be pushing.
In fact, Islam is responsible for more war as a religious system. In terms of religious wars, only about 7% of known warfare in the last 8,000 years can be traced to religious roots. And of those wars that have a religious component, the minority of wars that have a religious component, because over 93% are secular, the Islam is responsible for more war and killing than all other religions combined.
Religion of peace.
Yeah. The religion of peace, exactly. Yellow, warm, peace. Yep, exactly. Yeah. Mark Carney, I don't know, but the Fabians are all over the world. They've got different organizations under different names. So yeah, I can do a second series on that if you guys want. I can put together some slides. I've already looked into their political infiltration into the US. These people are everywhere. Thunderous, anything before I move on?
No, I'm okay, Lloyd.
Okay, so yeah, I've got another 12 slides to go. Let's finish this today. So the window, back to this window, you can see here, pray devoutly, hammer stoutly. These people are socialists, meaning they're atheists. But they need to pray devoutly, hammer stoutly. What are they praying to? Well, of course, they're praying to themselves, to their own works. Industrial democracy, the Minority Report on the Poor Law, English local government, history of trade unionism. They're praying literally to legal manuals, Fabian tracts and essays, getting married, plays for Puritans. What is London? Whatever. But this is fascinating. Industrial democracy. They're praying to their own administrative texts. Crazy stuff, right? Then, of course, you've got two of these guys here hammering the world. Africa, Europe, Asia, Australia. They're hammering the world into shape. They're beating the world into shape with hammers. Here you can see the Fabian Society logo, right? A wolf in sheep's clothing. A wolf dressed as a sheep. And then, of course, you've got, right, not sure what that is, but you've got a guy, he's fanning the flames here, right? He's fanning the flames. And yeah, so, and then, of course, this here, we'll get to that in a moment. So, Shaw designed the window in 1910. Yeah.
Sorry, can you actually zoom in? I think the fourth guy at the bottom has a book with something written on it. So let's see if we see what it says.
New World for Old. New Worlds for Old. The New World Order, basically. New World for Old.
Yep.
It's a play on the word.
New World, yeah.
I was going to say, because in 2 Peter, I think it is, where it's written, God inspires Peter to write, for there's going to be a new heavens and a new earth. Everything about this is in verse. You see, the Bible says, God says, let us make man in our image. And here we are looking at human beings saying, let's make God in the image of us. Yep. We will be God. We will fashion the planet. These are our holy texts. And we will create the master race. Yeah.
Labor manuals, legal text. This is Sharia. This is simply This is Fabian Sharia. This is the law. Their religion is the state and the legal texts of the state, and this is their Sharia. This is modeled on Islam. We're going to have a look at that, but this is modeled, please understand, this is modeled on Islam. This is modeled on the Sharia, right? And David James Flood is correct here. These people literally believe themselves to be gods. They believe the first lie told by the serpent in the Garden of Eden. And I want you to see this line: remold it nearer to the heart's desire. So remold the world nearer to the heart's desire. Do what thou wilt is the whole of the law. That is the Satanic Creed. That's Crowley's Satanic Creed. Keep that in mind. So we have George Bernard Shaw and Mr. Webb here hammering out the new world order on an anvil. Yes, Thunderous?
I was just going to say that even that phrase there, the heart's desire, that's still yet again an inverse challenge to what the Bible says. Because in the book of Jeremiah it says the heart is more treacherous and desperate, and who can know it? So it's, you know, and the God of the Bible is inclining people to walk away from the desires of the heart, because that's what normally leads people to badness. He's asking us to use our thinking faculties over our emotional ones. These people are going in the opposite direction. They're going inverse to what the God of the Bible is saying.
Yeah, but they're mocking God here. They're playing God. But so now below we have smaller figures that worship a pile of Fabian books. They're worshiping their own minds. They're worshiping themselves, the fruit of their own intellectual endeavors, their little tracts and you know, their policies. They're worshiping their own policies. And of course, pray devoutly, hammer stoutly. And David James Flood says Fabian Sharia is a great way of putting it, Lloyd. Yeah, it is. So the whole phrase, we will remake the world in our image, right? So the religious language we see in that image is deliberate satire. Shaw designed the window as a provocative inside joke for the Fabian Society. That's modeled, of course, on the religious ideas in the West, right? Pray devoutly. So Shaw and the leading Fabians were overwhelmingly secular, agnostic, or atheist, at least at first, at least for a time, or at least on the surface, right? Let's say that. The prayer is a tongue-in-cheek jab at their own intellectual fanaticism. These are intellectual fanatics, but they're also effectively religious fanatics. If you look at the bottom panel, the figures are not praying to God. They're kneeling in blind reverence to a stack of Fabian books and socialist tracts, socialist papers. Shaw's mocking the cult-like devotion of his own political movement. I don't think he's mocking them. I think he's showing this is how devoted we are. Hammer stoutly. This is the hard, practical work of forcing society into their desired shape, hammering society into the shape that they want it to be, in their image, remaking the world in their image. Directly above the furnace, Sidney Webb and Shaw depicted wielding hammers. They're striking a glowing molten globe, the earth, on an anvil to forge it into a new system. Now, the top banner is what is interesting. This ties the hammer imagery together, quoting Sufi poet Omar Khayyam. So they had to pick a Muslim, of course, because the major driving idea that pushes them is, of course, an Islamic idea. No surprise, right? Remold it nearer to the heart's desire from the Rubaiyat. Now, he was their weapon against Christian belief because they were anti-Christian. They opposed Christian ideas. They opposed God. They opposed the Christian world order in the Christian moral system, right? This is where that line comes from. Ah, love, could you and I with him conspire to grasp this sorry scheme of things? See, the world is messed up, it's broken, and we are just the guys. We're the socialists that are going to fix it. To grasp this sorry scheme of things entire, would not we shatter it to bits and then remold it nearer to the heart's desire? You see, Marx wanted to, burn the world down and then rebuild it. That's the typical Marxist socialist idea, the whole Leninist, Stalinist, Engels idea. You destroy the world and then it rises from the ashes anew. You see, I wonder if they got this from a Muslim. I just wonder if they got this from a Sufi. And the answer, of course, is fucking yes, yes, yes. This is a Sufi idea. It's a Muslim idea. And of course, Marx got it from, God knows where Marx got it, but it's Gnostic and it's slightly Islamic according to these guys. Any thoughts before I go on?
This is quite something, particularly when there is a particular sentence that appears somewhere. It's all about the context. So it wouldn't surprise me if these people, they know what basically the rest of the poem is not just remolded nearer to the heart's desire, but they know the whole thing, including that would it not be shattered to 2 bits, and then so it looks like they understand this quite well, and they are all behind it.
Yep. So hold on. Look, Daniel says Omar Khayyam's Rubaiyat is full of anti-Islamic statements. Man, apparently saying that Muhammad married a 6-year-old and shagged her when she was a minor, that's anti-Islamic. Hell, I don't know. Is it anti-Islamic or is it just a fact that's written throughout all Islamic literature? So yeah, what's anti-Islamic? You know, are we sure that the Sufis aren't more knowledgeable than the average Muslim? Are there elements of the law that maybe we don't know about? Maybe that aren't advertised publicly? Maybe there's stuff in the Sharia that actually confirms. I mean, let's hold on a second, guys. Before I get back to you, just give me one moment. Let's have a look at things that are anti-Islamic. I just want to bring up this one thing here. I'm going to bring this up. This is anti-Islamic. Okay, I'm going to bring this up. And I'm going to bring this up because this one, and I'm going to bring this one because let's look at a few anti-Islamic things. This, I'm told, is anti-Islamic, but this is lining up to use a boy. This is from Sawaqab al-Manaqib. This is from the Ottoman Empire. They were celebrating homosexual sex with boys in Islamic art. Apparently it's anti-Islamic, but they were celebrating it publicly in art. Let's have a look. That looks very, this is anti-Islamic, but Muslims were celebrating this in art. Let's see what else. Oh yeah, male youth penetrating an adult male, Turkey. Anti-Islamic, so is Bachabazi apparently. Oh yeah, an Ottoman miniature from the book Sawaqab al-Manaqib depicting homosexuality. Is this shit really anti-Islamic, or is that just an excuse people make? Yeah, Thunderous, you were saying?
No, I've lost my thought now. Those images have stayed in my mind, dude.
Yeah. So yeah, anyway, but guys, take screenshots. It's on my X account. Check me out on X, just under my name, Lloyd de Jong, and post those images to Muslims and ask them what they think of that when they start talking about Epstein and all sorts of stuff. You know, just say, hey, how come Muslims were celebrating this stuff in literature, in paintings? It's all, that was the norm back then. And now suddenly you guys throw gays off buildings, but then when you have a chance, you're grooming little boys as Bachabazi, you know, we have questions. Hopefully they have answers. So Islam was their weapon against Christian beliefs, right? And the wolf in sheep's clothing, to confirm this window is cynical rather than sincere. Look at the shield between the hammering men. It's a wolf in sheep's clothing. So this is a brazen admission of the Fabian strategy of gradual, disguised infiltration of the political establishment rather than open revolution. And of course, there's also the tug of war between the open revolutionaries, those who want it now through violence. That was the Marxist way, and their way, the Fabian way of evolution versus revolution. These Marxists and Fabians, they have the same goals. It's how they want to achieve it that is different. So they were elevating their own ideology to the status of a religion while hammering the world in their image. So let's continue, right? Tony Blair, Fabian values or Labour Party values. Now, H.G. Wells quit the society. Here he is depicted dressed in green, thumbing his nose at them because he left. Now, did he really leave? If you leave the mafia, have you ever really gone? You know, one has to wonder sometimes, right? So the window was stolen from a Fabian country house in 1978. Disappeared. Then it turned up in Arizona for a brief period. Then it surfaced one day at Sotheby's in July 2006. And then on the 20th of April 2006, it was unveiled at the London School of Economics, the university that the Fabians founded, and it was presented by Tony Blair, the sitting Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And Blair stood in front of the stained glass window featuring a literal wolf in sheep's clothing. And he said on the record, a lot of the values that the Fabians and that George Bernard Shaw stood for would be very recognizable. At least I hope they would in today's labor party. That is just fucking crazy for him to say that. Thoughts, guys, before I go on?
You say it's crazy, but it's not really in the grand scheme of things. It's what else could he say? In truth, and honestly, he's just being honest. But I think he's being honest in the knowledge that the masses that have voted for the Labour Party are clueless as to what his hidden end-game agenda is to be inflicted upon them.
Yeah. So, guys, X at Lloyd de Jong, by the way. So, look, Labour is the spiritual descendant of these people, the Fellowship of the New Life and the Fabian Society. These people trying to perfect their moral status by being better than you, by being willing to murder you, and wanting to make everything gay. Yeah, let's go on. So finally, in 1941, George Orwell gave a lecture to the Fabian Society. It was called Culture and Democracy. He wrote it out as a manuscript and he sent it to them. When the published version appeared, Orwell discovered they had rewritten the entire lecture without his permission, without telling him. Right? So his letter, he writes to them in July 1942. I see that besides toning down several phrases I used, you have gone all through my manuscript and altered every phrase which revealed that I was delivering a spoken lecture. It gives a false impression of my written style. So in 1949, Orwell instructed his literary executors that the lecture was substantially altered. In other words, in 1984, they speak of the past was altered, right? They would change the books. They would change the text of the books to give a false impression. Well, it happened to him. The Fabian Society did it to George Orwell. So his lecture was substantially altered and deformed all the way through without my knowledge or consent, and he ordered that it never be reprinted. So there you go. Let's look at George Orwell's book, 1984. The man who wrote about the manipulation of language, of books, of history by institutions, had his own language manipulated by this very ugly institution. Then he spent the rest of his life writing about exactly that kind of manipulation to warn people. He named his book 1984 and probably did not name it after the Fabian centenary. Remember, they were found in 1884, but he probably didn't name it after the 100-year centenary. Who knows? So the manuscript showed that he changed the date 3 times. He had 3 different dates assigned. And the working title was The Last Man in Europe. So he had a number of different names. And it was published on June 8th, 1949. So 1984 just seems like a date in the future. So I don't know. Yeah. Anyways, let's talk about the beauties of Islam. Let's talk about one of the major founders of the Fabian Society and the beauties of Islam. Any thoughts before I go on, guys?
Yeah, I've got the pamphlet by H.G. Wells. It's called Politics in the English Language. It's only a very brief pamphlet, but he makes an interesting comment about how language is a fair reflection on the state of society. And I think if people was to go back, say, 40, 50 years and pick up a piece of literature, maybe a news article or maybe something of intellectual value, or even within the academic system, there would be words and phrases used that would be a reflection of the moral and academic standing of society at the time. And as time moves forward, he made a comment that the more base or casual the language becomes, it's a fair reflection on the intellectual value of society at the time. So we're seeing that the truth of what he said there in the past as a fair reflection today, because language has become so watered down and diluted and base, it lacks the sophistication and coherence that it had in the past. It's only a small read, it's only a small pamphlet, but I thoroughly recommend everybody to read it.
All right. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the Fabian Society and Islam and where they went from there. Because just like Mr. Crowley, Mr. Aleister Crowley, I need to do a part 2 of that. I have a busy period at the moment, work-wise, and also I'm traveling for the next week. So it's going to be difficult for me to do anything before the 14th. Again, maybe tomorrow and the next day, but then, okay, but let's talk about the beauties of Islam, Fabian Islamic parallels. So beyond the stained glass window motto, they have a direct quote from Omar Khayyam. So you have the links between the Fabian Society and its parent group, the Fellowship of the New Life, and Islamic and Sufi thought. Now, these are somewhat under the surface, but significant. And of course, I've got Annie Besant here in her book, right? So Thomas Davidson's Arab philosophy right? So the founder of the Fellowship of the New Life, Thomas Davidson, was a scholar of Neoplatonism and Arab philosophy. He specifically studied how Sufism influenced medieval Jewish and Christian thought. And his Vita Nuova, or New Life concept, was built on the idea that an intellectual elite could achieve a spiritual democracy, a concept with parallels to the Sufi idea, the Kanaka, community of seekers. Now, of course, the highest level of scholar within Islam and the leaders, the most gifted, would be what the Shia would probably call their, your Ayatollah, but this would be your Sufis. Annie Besant's Beauties of Islam was she was one of the most prominent early Fabians, right? Annie Besant was an outspoken defender of Islam. She created what would seem like a lot of what is current Islamic apologetics she was using back in the 30s. So she wrote The Beauties of Islam in 1932, and she argued that Islam was inherently more socialist and more democratic than Christianity. She praised Islamic laws on property and women's rights as being ahead of their time, using them to justify the Fabian push for social reform. And then you've got an idea called the vanguard and the tariqah. So you have the Fabian strategy of permeation. You've got a small enlightened elite where they influence the state from within. And this mirrors the structure of a Sufi tariqah, or Sufi order. In both systems, the uninitiated masses are guided by a vanguard, an elite of the specialists, technocrats, who possess a deeper understanding of the inner laws of society and the soul. A bunch of Gnostics, in other words. You have Edward Carpenter's Universal Brotherhood. So Edward Carpenter, we mentioned him. He was the flagrantly gay man who was telling us that, gay people should be the masters of government. They should run education because they're more enlightened than the rest of us, because they're not burdened by families and children. And they're actually better than all of us. We need gay people to really be the elite of society, the special ones, right? He was the saint of the New Life Circle, and he was obsessed with Universal Brotherhood. So while he leaned towards Hindu Vedanta, his religion of socialism, sought to strip away the outer law, the Sharia, the dogma, in favor of inner truth, or the Hakika, right? So he was looking for spiritual enlightenment. So this is the core distinction in Sufi mysticism. Carpenter used the Sufi distinctions, this framework, to argue for the normalization of deviant identities as a return to natural purity. You see, being deviant makes you pure and holy. Backwards, but okay. Then you've got, let's have a look at Baathism. Baathism, you might think of Iraq, and you might go back to the Gulf War and Saddam Hussein. Fabianism had a massive direct impact on the Middle East through Michael Aflaq, the founder of the Baath Party. Aflaq was heavily influenced by Fabian gradualism and the idea of national efficiency. Dictators are efficient. Democracy is messy. He essentially exported the Fabian model back into Islamic cultural context, creating a secular Arab socialism that used Islamic themes for state building. And you have the Fitra, right, connection. So the Fellowship of the New Life believed in the cultivation of a perfect character through being flamingly gay, lesbian, about being transgender, and all sorts of other crazy ideas. So this is almost identical to the Islamic concept of fitra, the innate pure state of a human being. So the New Life Circle argued that society's heterosexual norms and capitalist competition were artificial corruptions of the original natural state of being a Muslim, whatever. So they're taking these ideas, they're modifying them. That's what Gnostics will do. Any thoughts before I go on, guys?
Yeah, just on that, that's actually exactly what I wanted to ask. So it looks like these people are like extreme atheists, but then they go to Islam to borrow some of their ideas and then say, well, let's take that concept and change it a bit to fit our goals. It feels very backwards. It feels weird.
They rejected Christianity, just like within the Reformation. They had to find a new template because they couldn't work with the Catholic template, which they rejected, that framework. So they used Gnosticism and Islam, Sufism. And these guys are doing pretty much the same thing, except they also dig into serious occultism of Blavatsky. Thunderous?
Yeah, I was just saying, but Islam is doing exactly the same thing with gradualism. So they're both working in unity, but with a different ideology behind it, but the process is exactly the same.
Yeah, it's the Muslim Brotherhood infiltration. Exactly. The Muslim Brotherhood probably was influenced by these guys as well. and they're using the same ideas to infiltrate slowly into universities, into judiciaries, and so on. And there's a very strong similarity here. So Omar Khayyam, socialist prophet in the 19th century, Omar Khayyam, whose verse is on the Fabian window, was seen by British radicals as a rebel against dogma. He was a scientific mystic. Oh yeah. And he rejected rigid religious laws, but he would remold the world through intellect and design. In other words, through feelings, and we're really smart. Trust me, bro. And you have the Muslim Fabians. Now, many early 20th century Indian Muslim reformers from Aligarh Muslim University were trained in the UK, deeply influenced by Fabian circles. They saw the Fabian model of gradual social engineering as the best way to modernize Islamic society without the violent upheaval of Marxism. You got to wonder what kind of two-way street we're looking at here now between the UK government and these Muslims. The Fabians were masters of ijtihad, what they call independent reasoning in a secular sense. So they believed that laws should not be static like old religious codes, but should be constantly reinterpreted by experts to fit the needs of the time. And they were, of course, the mujtahid mutlaq, the absolute scholars who could interpret things and devise new laws. And this technocratic ijtihad is how they took the radical new life sexual ideas on gays, transgenders, and all of that, and lesbianism into mainstream legal policy. Remember, these people were crazy sexual deviants. We've covered that. And so they took these ideas and made it legal policy in the UK. I would say, Pete Ross, that that's total bullshit, because this is like saying Muslims have no agency, Muslims have no doctrine, Muslims haven't been doing this shit for 1400 years, and they didn't fucking wait for MI6 to be created before they got up to their bullshit. They've been doing it for longer than any of us has been alive. For over 1,000 years before we were born, they've been doing this shit. So the Muslim Brotherhood, one of the major founders of the Muslim Brotherhood was very much a Sufi. He was a Freemason, and yeah, those things have been around a little bit before the CIA, unless the CIA has a time machine. I'm really just really tired of hearing all of these, shall we say, conspiracy theories. I mean, we may as well start a conspiracy theory that says that parenthood, do you know that parenthood causes psychopaths? Parenthood should be banned because parenthood creates psychopaths. Do you know that having children creates psychopaths, so we need to ban having children? That's exactly the same argument, the same ridiculous argument that the Catholic Church created Islam. Now, the guys who make that argument should have a fight with the guys that say the Jews created Islam. Because, man, you can't have both ways. So you guys need to figure out which one it is, because you all contradict each other, right? Now, the fact is everybody was Catholic at one point, and in Arabia, most people were Jewish. So, of course, they're going to steal ideas. It doesn't mean you created it. And the fact that you had a kid doesn't mean you made him a psychopath. This is really bad reasoning. It is really specious. It is really stupid. And this is Candace Owens level reasoning. Seriously. I heard that the Muslim Brotherhood is controlled by the London elites. Is there any truth to that? Look, these guys were friends back in the Reformation era, the Muslims and the Protestants in London. I mean, the Queen was effectively bending over for the Sultan. If you go through the history, that's something I want to do on this channel. I've got a lot of notes on it. Queen Elizabeth was effectively bending over for the Sultan of the Ottomans, right? She was doing his bidding, and she couldn't get enough of his shaft in her mouth, basically. So this is where they were for last 500 years. Are they connected? Are they working together somehow? Probably. Are some of these secret Muslims? Certainly, right? But yeah, do we have all the evidence? No, but I think we need to go through it methodically. We need to go through it by the historical method and derive what is very probable, and not just accept the Candace Owens level nonsense and the typical kind of conspiracy theories as given. Guys, before I go on, any thoughts from you? Sorry for my little rant there.
I just wanted to ask one question. It goes back a slide. It's come to my mind what I wanted to ask. It's been prompted by Optim Prince. Forgive me if I've got your name wrong. And the comment he makes in the chat is, a woman defending Islam will always be hilarious and sad. Now, going back to what the lady said in your previous slide, where she said Islam and women's rights, that she could use that as the template for advancement. What is she looking at in order given Islam teaches that women only possess 50% intelligence, the inheritance laws do not make sense. A woman can be beaten, a man can have 4 wives. Everything within the Islamic literature is a negative to it, to a woman.
They just skip over those parts. They just skip over those parts. They're selective.
But what is, this is my point, the question. What is there? I have never come across anything really that is advantageous for anybody to select Islam.
They'll lie about it, because I'm actually going to cover her explicitly in the next couple of slides. We're going to go exactly into what she had to say. So yeah, I'm actually going to cover that. Yeah, Muslim Brotherhood was founded in 1928 in Ismailia, Egypt, by Hassan al-Banna, 22-year-old school teacher who was in response to British colonialism. Yeah, everything's in response to British colonialism. If there's nothing that isn't in response to British colonialism. Do you know that Irina Zarutska was killed because of, well, the only 2 possible causes, British colonialism or climate change? Which one killed her on that train? I have no idea. But a man plunged a knife into her neck. We cannot blame black people. We cannot blame agency. We can only say either British colonialism did it or climate change, one of the 2. So I'm going to go, she was killed by climate change. How's that for a change? Right? So yeah, no. He was a Muslim. Muslims want to kill you. They want the caliphate. They want to murder anyone who's not a Muslim. They want to force you to convert. They want to destroy Christianity. They want to burn all the churches. They want to enslave the women. They want to go back to the way it was under Muhammad. This has been the Muslim way for 1400 years. It's got fuck all to do with British colonialism. So maybe we need to start giving Muslims agency.
I may make a couple of comments on that. First is, when we talk about Islam nowadays, we seem to talk only about Muhammad and his time, and then what is happening now, and everything else is kind of a bit ignored. Anyone who doesn't understand Islam, just study the Ottoman Empire, because that was the longest empire. They were actually following Islam at its best. And of course, if you tell any Muslim, they will say, no, that is not true Islam. But the Ottomans, it was the longest caliphate. So study that, see how they acted, and you will see how things are. And on what Thunderous said about this selective thing, is the same propaganda that we get now, that you just get somebody saying good things about Islam and ignoring the sources. This is what has always happened. I saw on a podcast a little while ago, someone explaining that had heard from an imam how it is that the jinn can actually change the text in a book, but not in the memory. That's why they memorize the book. And also how wonderful it is that when it says that you are created from a liquid emanating from between the backbone and the ribs, how modern science has actually proven. And the guy is talking nonsense. So you know that he has just gone to an imam who has just given him the Dawah script. He hasn't done any research. So he just say those things. So when these people say things like, oh my goodness me, in those countries they give so many rights to women, is these people did not read the sources. They spoke with a Dawah guy who told them, in our countries, women have more rights than in your country. And then they come to the UK and say, well, their method is better. They did not do any research, and if they did, well, then they are liars and frauds.
Yeah, you know something, like if you look in South Africa at the moment, you've got all these blacks that's being run by, it's a black government now, and they're in power. Ask yourself, honestly, right, when explorers from Europe traveled to the third world, when they came to Africa, did they find equivalent cities, roads, bridges, tall buildings, multi-story buildings? Did they find cranes, dams? Did they find harbors, navigation, ships, medicine, science, optics? No, they found the most primitive people who were at best in the Copper Age, at best, right? None of them could sustain a city. None of these supposedly more advanced civilizations lasted very long. And I'd be willing to venture that if you look at Great Zimbabwe, for instance, as an example of supposedly an advanced stone building culture, advanced architectural society, they were probably invaded by a much dumber but far more violent and effective warlike tribe. Just wipe them out. Because when the explorers from Europe got to Africa, they found primitive, backwoods, near cave dwellers, right? How do you expect that these people who've literally achieved nothing in their entire history as a culture, And this is not to be cruel. This is just a statement of fact. They've achieved nothing in their entire history, in the last 30,000 years. How do you expect them to run a modern, intellectual, industrial society? They have no template for it. They have no precedent for it. They don't have the intellectual capacity. They don't have the experience. They don't have the culture. Nothing. So yeah, you are dealing with the worst kinds of thinkers, the worst kinds of culture. And to keep blaming it on freaking climate change or the Brits. I'm not saying the Brits weren't bad. They are. They were. The Brits did some horrible things, right? The Brits did some disgusting things. They were involved in some, as we've seen here, some crazy, nasty things. But you can't go all the Brits, the Jews. No, be specific. I distrust people who paint with a broad brush, right? And when people go, oh, white people enslaved, no. Less than 2% of white people own slaves. Those were the elite. Those were the financial elite. Joe Moe on the corner, he didn't own any slaves. He's not responsible for slavery. His family never owned any slaves. He's got nothing to do with the problem. He doesn't owe anybody a cent in reparations. And the black guy calling for it, you know, he was never a slave. He's benefiting. He's living a great life in America. He can move to Africa and he can get killed. No problem. But he's happy in America. Life is good. He's got a job, a car, and a fantastic. He's got electricity and all that stuff. He was never a slave. He doesn't deserve a single cent in reparations. Welfare is really paid for reparations multiple times over. So let's just leave that there for now, right? Yeah, because there was nothing in Africa, so they didn't have to go steal any vibranium. There was nothing in Africa. So okay, yeah, Muslims behead Christians because climate change in the U.S. Yeah, okay, so. The esoteric strategy. So like many Sufi groups that historically operated in secret, remember the Muslim Brotherhood is the biggest secret society in the world. It's got something like 500,000 members and millions of adherents, supporters, right? And they operate in secret under the guise of orthodox behavior to avoid persecution. And the Fabians use a strategy of socialist taqiyya, concealment. They've been hiding in the shadows, embedding themselves, infiltrating quietly for decades, over a century. They often presented their most radical ideas, like the total restructuring of the family, in the very boring language of statistics and administrative reports, government reports, to avoid triggering a public backlash. Have you seen a public policy paper saying we're going to import infinite Bamalians to rape kids in Rotherham? No, you didn't. They would simply write a report stating, in the interests of improving our GDP, and of course with our aging population, we feel that we need to import younger workers who are going to benefit the gross national product of the country and boost our savings so that we can pay out our retirees in the future. They didn't say we're going to import 1 million rapey, unemployed welfare people who are going to stab you on the high street in Rotherham.
That's yeah. When you're talking about something that's going to be implemented incrementally over, I mean, these are things that are drawn out over 30, 40, 50 years. They're not working to a 5 or a 10-year plan. It's interesting to know that, because when you look at, say, the feminist movement and abortion, well, abortion started legalizing and promoting fornication and legalizing the murder of children. But then when you start looking at the feminist movement of equal pay, better education, and better careers, I think I may have touched on this last week or the week before, what it's done is created a vacuum of a society that doesn't have or have as much children as it should have would have done, because women have now, sort of like for the past, say, 40 years, gone on to have careers, gone on to get education, and are now looking back because they may not have realized it, but they're fallen into a trap of not having children, not settling down with families, and have ended up on their own. So in effect, what I'm trying to say is a vacuum has been created knowingly. So if you work into an incremental plan that is working from one generation to the next, or even a generation or two in time, as it were, then you have to create a vacuum, and that vacuum has justified, if you like, the requirement of immigrants to come in. And you've created this vacuum of requirement of immigrants, and you can sell it to the public because of paying for the pensions. We need more workers to do these roles. Yep. I mean, I think it was Nick Polanski that said the other day, we need these people because I don't want to clean my own toilet, or some putrid comment of the like.
Yeah.
But they also know at the same time that they know exactly where they're going to get the immigrants from. They know the psychology of the immigrants, and they know the age brackets of the immigrants that they want, because they know that the influence or the destruction that they're going to cause when they land in a country like this.
Agreed. Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. So last 4 slides. Let's finish this. So guys, I get really angry with some of this stuff because one, I look into these and I've got to read all these documents and learn about these very sick people. But I also see on social media really bad arguments presented by some very intelligent people who are stupid as well, far too stupid for how educated they are, right? Who've been gulled by idiots and who are taking very specious ideas as somehow proven fact. And to me, that's very disturbing. If I can spend the time to determine what I think is legitimate, look at the sources, and come up with the conclusions I do here, then I don't see how people with far more resources than me, who are multimillionaires, who run media empires, who can hire 30 researchers, can't come up with this. And they don't, because maybe they have an agenda, you know? So, yeah. Okay, Annie Besant, Islam, Blavatsky, and the Maitreya. So, Annie Besant, she's a former Anglican. She's an estranged Anglican priest's wife, and she rejected Christianity. She embraced atheism. She was a leading speaker for both the Fabian Society and the Marxist Social Democratic Federation. She was elected to the London School Board for Tower Hamlets. And how many Muslims are in Tower Hamlets now? Infinity Muslims, right? She topped the poll, even though few women were qualified to vote at the time. Now, ask yourself, the Pakistani Prime Minister was at the London School of Economics. He was influenced by the Fabians, and now you've got infinity Pakistanis in Britain. Ask yourself if these connections have any relevance to today, if they stretch back through little old boys networks, if there's anything going on that you don't know about. She met Helena Blavatsky in 1890, and then she became interested in Theosophy, and she converted to whatever. She became a member of the Theosophical Society and a prominent lecturer. As part of her Theosophy-related work, she travels to India. In 1898, she helps establish the Central Hindu School, and in 1922, she helps to establish the Hyderabad National Collegiate Board in Bombay. Fine and well. The Theosophical, yeah, honors?
No, no comment.
Right. So the Theosophical Society Auditorium in Hyderabad is called Besant Hall in her honor. In 1902, she establishes the first overseas lodge of the International Order of Freemasonry. They call it co-Freemasonry because that's female Freemasons. It's like you have women separated from the men, just like in Islam. So you have the female co-Freemasons separated from the men, just like in Islam, right? And it's called le droit humain, whatever that means in French. She established these Freemason lodges, plural, in many parts of the British Empire. In 1907, she becomes president of the Theosophical Society in Adyar, Madras, now known as Chennai. She became president of the Indian National Congress in 1917. In the 20s, she travels to the US with a protege and adopted son, Jiddu Krishnamurti, this guy here, right? And she claimed he was the Messiah. So her adopted Indian son is the Messiah. He's the incarnation of Buddha. He was raised to fulfill the mantle of the prophesied world teacher, a role tasked with aiding humankind's spiritual evolution. So she was the mother of the Messiah. Fucking great. Any thoughts, guys, before I go on?
I'm actually just looking for something. I was just thinking about the life of Brian, the part of he's not the Messiah. He's a very naughty boy. So, but yeah, that's kind of like weird. What sort of person says my son is the Messiah? This is just weird. I mean, does he mean Messiah or Mahdi?
Yeah, we're gonna have a look at it. We need to get a little. Yeah, let's go. So he was a torchbearer of truth. He was an emissary of a hidden spiritual hierarchy. Fantastic. Let's listen to Besant on Christianity. Now remember, she was a highly influential leading figure in the Fabian Society. They all came out of the Fellowship of the New Life, right? And she was a prominent speaker. She was an author. She was a key strategist who helped to bridge the society with broader labor movements. Right? She was working on embedding their ideas into industry, into trade unions, and so on. She was a very close associate with George Bernard Shaw and Sidney Webb, and she contributed to the Fabian essays in socialism. right? And she asserted that the greatest saints of the church were men who despised women. And she said, against the teachings of eternal torture, of the vicarious atonement, of the infallibility of the Bible, I leveled all the strength of my brain and tongue, and I exposed the history of the Christian church with unsparing hand, its persecutions, its religious wars, its cruelties, its oppressions. In other words, she's an anti-Christian propagandist. She hated Christianity, right? You can see here, I'm just going to see the esoteric Christianity. She writes this book, Esoteric Christianity, here by Annie Besant. In the section named Its Evidences Unreliable of her work, Christianity, Besant presents the case of why the Gospels are not authentic. Before about AD 180, she says there is no trace of 4 Gospels amongst the Christians. So these are people who want to perfect their character. They want to become the best possible moral character that a human being can have. They want political power, and they hate Christianity. They hate the Bible. They hate Jesus, and her son is the Messiah. Fantastic, fantastic. In her autobiography, she then follows her chapter on socialism with Through Storm to Peace, right? We're going to peace, the religion of peace and all that, through the peace of theosophy. So she promoted esoteric Christianity by arguing that the religion contains an inner mystical core. She's a Gnostic as well, often obscured by literal dogma, but there's a secret teaching. You see, there's Gnostic teaching in Christianity. In her 1901 work, Esoteric Christianity, she reinterpreted the life of Christ as a symbolic map for the soul's evolution. You too can be the Christ. You too can become a Messiah. You too can have the Christ consciousness. And you can seek to align she tries to align Christian teachings with universal spiritual laws and ancient wisdom. The kind of stuff they talked about, killing the Jews, killing black people, killing people you don't like. Any thoughts, guys, before I go to the last couple of pages? We've got 3 more pages to do.
When you were talking about like you could be Christ-like, you see many of the evangelical churches talk in that kind of manner. They'll use illustrations. When God created man in His image, He basically created a little God, and they use the analogy of what do cats do? They give birth to cats. What dogs do? They give birth to dogs. So God made Adam, who was a little God. So what would Adam's offspring be? They would be little gods too. So you can is that where all this comes from Annie Besant, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, the problem is, I need to get back into the Reformation. That's outside the scope of this, but this is very twisted philosophy. We'll have a little look at it, but she has a deep love for Islam. We're going to have a little bit of a look at that in a moment.
Okay, yeah. So this lady was a socialist, Marxist, rejected Christianity, Gnostic, whose son was the Messiah. And this is the right person where you need to take your Christianity from.
Yes, exactly. The son is the Messiah. And so let's have a look at IslamicVoice.com, Perspectives, Revisiting Annie Besant's lecture on the beauties of Islam. I'll read you a small section, then we'll go to the article. Islam as a religion is often fairly attacked because it is utterly misunderstood as to the greatness of its prophet and the nobility of his teachings to the world. The 3 chief attacks the Westerns make against Islam are that it is fanatically persecuting and not progressive, that the position of women in Islam is not such as it should be, and lastly, that it does not encourage learning, science, and intellectual endeavor. She dismisses all of these allegations with cogent reasons, often quoting the Holy Quran and the Hadiths. So Annie Besant was defending any false accusations that Islam beats women, treats them as property, and all of these things that apparently we don't know any better about. Annie Besant points out there's no intermixture in his history. This is Muhammad. In the mythic element, his life was led in the glare of history. Muhammad was 100% historical. We have accurate, up-to-date historical. Christ didn't exist, but Muhammad is legit. He was in the 7th century of the Christian era. To quote her, how utterly ignorant are those who attack the Prophet Muhammad. And this is shown by history. Many do not know the history of his life. So simple, so heroic, so noble in its outlines. One of the great lives of historic men. And how simple and frugal his life. He didn't take 20% from all of the theft, the robbery, the caravan robbery, the piracy. No. His life was simple and frugal. He mended his own broken shoes. He patched his own coat. He was tailor and cobbler for himself, even when, sorry, I'm going to cry here. Such a humble guy. When towards the close of his life, thousands around him bowed down to him as prophet. And where you have these two qualities in one character, the love of children, yeah, he loved him, little children, and a character that makes the men around him call him the trustworthy, Al-Amin. You have the elements of a hero, a born leader, of a teacher of men.
While his 9-year-old wife was scraping spunk semen stains from his clothing. Yeah, is that the same guy? Is this the same guy that said you can drink camel urine and it's good for the gut? Is this the guy that was putting nails in people's eyes and then trying to burn people so that he could find out where hidden treasures were? Is this the same guy? Same guy. Yeah. Okay.
Same guy. JC, before I go on deeper into this.
Yeah, I mean, she did get one thing right, I think, about the love of children. That's certainly, she got that one spot on, not just because of Aisha, but because of Hassan. So this is recorded. So there you go. Incredible. If this lady was around, I'm sure she would not debate you on Sharia. Pretty sure of that.
Nobody wants to. Nobody wants
Hassan,
to.
Little Hassan, is that the little boy whose tongue he sucked?
Yep.
Yeah, that's Islamophobic to mention facts about Islam. That's written in there. Yeah, it's okay. Anyway, but if you are like me and Thunderous and Jay, you've got Islam fatigue. Okay, I've got Islam fatigue. It's not Islamophobia. It's Islam fatigue. We all have it. Right, The Beauties of Islam by Annie Besant. And literally, this was the very first result I pulled up on Google. Okay, I was looking for something about this, and I just pulled up the very first result on Google. So this is the first result I came to. It was so easy to find. Let's see. She gives a talk on Islam in the light of theosophy. So just like Crowley, who was into theosophy and said, Islam is perfect for me as the world's most famous Satanist. I love Islam. I hate Christianity. I think Jesus was a wussy, but Muhammad was fantastic. Annie Besant, as a theosophist, also goes, Jesus, screw that guy. Christianity, forget that nonsense. Islam's the way to go. It's weird how the world's greatest Satanist and this major theosophist, both of them connected through theosophy. Yeah, it's amazing how they like Islam so much. She explains that theosophy is divine wisdom. And this guy says this lecture was published in 1912 by the Theosophical Publishing House, right? And it was published many times in booklet form, right? And which is called The Beauties of Islam. So in other words, this guy's not disagreeing that this theosophy and Islam, they merge very well together. It is interesting to know the views of Annie Besant on Islam because it contributes to interfaith dialogue. So this bullshit artist of a woman contributed these bullshit apologetics to interfaith dialogue, which should tell you that interfaith dialogue is a scam. Annie Besant opines that Islam as a religion is unfairly attacked, okay? And she uses the Quran and the Hadith. She doesn't like the Bible, that's nonsense, but the Quran, good to go, right? She talks about how frugal and he mended his own shoes. What nonsense, right? She says regarding polygamy, she says that when Islam was revealed, people were living in promiscuity and had no sex morality. So Muhammad had to come along and say, look, just grab all the women you can, shag them all, right? Including 6-year-olds. Only gradual reform was possible, and therefore man was allowed to have 4 wives, but on the condition that a husband might only take a second wife if he could treat her in all respects as the first. She points out that the true and right sex relation between one man and one woman is preached as an ideal in some countries, but is gender practiced in none. You see, everybody has multiple wives. To quote from the book, there is pretended monogamy in the West, but there's really polygamy without responsibility. The mistress is cast off when the man is tired of her, and she sinks gradually to be the woman of the streets. For the first lover has no responsibility for her future, and she's 100 times worse off than the sheltered wife and mother in the polygamous home. That's a bullshit equivalence. That's a false equivalence because they're not married. And sure, as we discussed, the Fellowship of the New Life was a bunch of sexual deviants and people with completely broken personal lives. These were not healthy people. These were sexually immoral people. These were broken people from broken homes. And yeah, I think, so these are This man's not married to the mistress. That's a moral sin, we call it, and it's a crime for some in some cases, and it's moral sin in others. This is not a marriage, so this is a false equivalence. I don't know how she wants to make that. Maybe in her group where she comes from, that was the norm, with the crazy people she was hanging out with. Any thoughts before I go on, guys?
I'm just thinking that if this lady said that her son is the Messiah, I think she was trying to make herself into Mother Mary.
Yeah, she was. Probably, yeah, I would say so. Remember, they were worshipping themselves as people who are recreating the world. Yeah. Yeah, these are crackpots. I mean, yeah, another common diatribe against Islam is that it is a persecuting faith, a religion of the sword. Annie Besant clarifies that the injunction, slay the infidels, is only for those who attack you. That's why the Muslims, had to travel all the way from Mecca, all the way across Africa, multiple countries, then across Gibraltar into Spain, and from Spain into France in the 690s and early 700s to attack the French and the Spanish in the 690s, to fight a defensive war against the French, because they were worried that in several centuries, maybe 1,000, 2,000 years, the French might come and attack them. So they had to go out of Arabia into Eastern Europe, into Hungary, Slovakia, Slovenia, Italy, Greece, Spain, France. They had to, because they were worried they would be attacked. There was defensive war. They went into all of Europe, Asia, and Africa defensively. And if anyone believes any of that shit, I mean, seriously, guys, your thoughts?
I was just reading through the things that you've just presented on the slides, and I was going to say they've come straight from the typical Islamic Dawa script, almost verbatim. Yet the irony is this is well before the Dawa script. So the Dawa script, in effect, has actually copied this as its own new sort of like a polemic and apologetic mantra for when speaking to Christians. It's something that I showed to JC a couple of weeks ago about when Muslims say 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 = 1 actually originates from Jehovah's Witnesses, because I actually went on to eBay to buy the tract. It's a tract that they handed out in 1953. It doesn't originate with Islam. And it seems like nothing seems to originate in Islam. This here, and the irony is as well, it's a woman that's written the Dawa script for Muslims today to use.
Yeah, she's a Fabian. This is a Fabian that created the Dawa script that people are using today, and she wrote it in the 1930s. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy? She was defending Islam using the apologetics that Muslims use today.
When you think about it as well, I'm just thinking about Khadija. It was, and I've often said this, Islam is predicated on the actions of Khadija, not Muhammad. It was Khadija that took hold of the situation. It was Khadija that created the prophet that is Muhammad.
Liberal woman with a ring in her nose.
So when you analyze it, Islam seems to be very strongly has some origins or moments of movement that are all predicated on the actions of women. There's an irony in there somewhere.
Yeah. No. So finally, she says that, slay the infidels is only for those who attack you. And she says, nor should it be forgotten that some of the exhortations now interpreted as universal were really addressed by the Prophet as a general to his troops just going into battle, often against overwhelming odds. The poor guy, and were intended to rouse them to courage in the impending fight. Oh my God, it's so heartbreaking. Oh my God. And she says here that he taught his soldiers to treat their captured foes with utmost kindness. Yeah, that's ISIS need to learn that. And her concluding remarks are pertinent to the present times. And that purpose is the drawing together of Muslims and Hindus or Muslimans. For India can never become a nation until Hindus, Zoroastrians, Christians, and Muslimans understand each other. Shall we not all put aside theological hatreds and feel alike brothers? Shall we not learn to respect each other's faith and reverence each other's worship? Each should not only love his faith, but also live it and realize that his neighbor's faith is as precious to his neighbor as his own is precious to himself. Oh my God, such beautiful words. Oh my God, this is crazy. Anyone ready to say the Shahada yet? But anyway, so yeah, guys. So she's like a major propagandist for the Fabians. She's an occultist. She's a socialist, and she's big on defending Muslims as if she's a Muslim. She's big on defending Islam as if she's converted to Islam. Isn't that really strange? And she hates Christianity. But we should all get along. And Christianity is false. But okay, that's what she has to tell us. But yeah, guys. So there you go. So let's finish the last couple of slides. So any comment, JC, before I get to the last slide? We have 2 more pages to go.
Just say that something like that, say up to 15 years ago, people would read that and say, oh my goodness me, Islam is wonderful. But now people are hyper-educated on Islam. You've discussed this many times before. If any of those things were actually posted on X right now, there would be hundreds, if not thousands of comments, people debunking all of that. So we can see how propaganda that in the past, people would have read that and just accepted it. Now people are like, no thanks, now we know best.
Yeah. So we've covered a little bit now about the Fabian Society, its founders, its influence, and you can see literally verbatim how they've influenced Islamic apologetics. They've done more than influence just the Ba'ath Society, the Ba'ath political party in Iraq. They've had their tentacles everywhere. So the Fabian Society, now, first of all, personnel is policy. People is policy. Personnel is policy. If you hire a bunch of Muslims and put them into your cabinet, that's because you've got favoritism going on. If you hire a bunch of pedophiles at the BBC, it's because, well, you have a little thing for that kind of thing, okay? So understand, personnel is always policy. And the personnel at the Fabian Society are some of the worst degenerates in society, some of the worst of human beings, worst of humankind. And just leave it, just think about that. Personnel is always policy. The Fabian Society is not a conspiracy theory. They published their reports openly. Everything that I showed you here is publicly written. I showed you the guy saying it himself. He wants to kill everybody, right? Their statements are public. Their conferences are attended by MPs, journalists, lobbyists, financiers, presidents. Their policy papers do become government legislation. They're not hiding. Their founders hated Christianity, but they loved Islam and gay sex. They've also been betting for 140 years that you would be too busy to look, that you wouldn't see them, you wouldn't see what they do, you wouldn't see who they are, you wouldn't see where they came from. For 140 years, that bet has paid off for them. They now run UK politics and UK policy. They've shaped UK society. They've shaped the UK's law. They shaped the judiciary. They've shaped politics. They've shaped policing. They are obviously shaping free speech. They're shaping responses to resistance to them. But now public sentiment is changing. Now you've learned something about them. Talk about this. All you've got to do is talk about this. Make it public. It drips through. Believe me, it percolates. You don't have to change the world. Just speak to a few friends. It percolates. It changes public sentiment. Public sentiment changes policy, changes politics. Just talk about this. People need to know the satanic, deviant, ugly, disgusting, Hitler-loving freaks that are at the heart of the deep state in the UK and other places. But this one focused on the UK effectively. These are the people you need to vote out. These are the people you've got to root out. These are the things you need to point a finger at. Shine a light on it. The cockroaches hate the light. So you've been informed. You know who they are. You know what genocidal, inhuman ideas their founders had. You know what influence they've had on modern discourse. You've seen it directly. The Labour government is now spending more on welfare than it is raising an income tax. In the 2025-2026 financial year, the Treasury raised $331 billion in income tax. In the same year, the government spent over $333 billion on welfare. It is spending your money on welfare for people who don't work, that hate you, and are raping your kids. The combined spending on the NHS and social care has now surpassed the total revenue collected from the national insurance contributions and corporation tax combined. The NHS and social care welfare is bankrupting you. And if you're a migrant that came in on a boat, you've stabbed people, you've raped people, you've committed fraud, you've broken into the country, you'll get medical care in minutes. In fact, there might be a private doctor at your hotel every day for you. If you're a British citizen, you pay taxes, you've worked hard your whole life, well, you know what? Wait 9 weeks. We'll get back to you. So the Department of Health and Social Care budget is set to exceed $200 billion in the 2025-2026 cycle. So they're bankrupting your country to destroy you and replace you with a group of people that despises you, that is undermining you, that is going to destroy your culture, and then they will be able to destroy it. As they say, they need to break down society, destroy society, burn it down, and then they'll raise it from the ashes. It's all just a Marxist fantasy. So if you know something factual about this and relevant, please share it, put it in the comments later. But yeah, and for those who haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Please do like this. Every like apparently shares this out to 10 people. And yeah, and if you haven't done so yet, please do like the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. But now I'll leave it open to JC and Thunderous. That was the end of this for me. I said
Wow.
freaks.
Well, I really need to think about all of this, but certainly the blasphemy laws that are already de facto in the UK and what they are trying to pass into law, and also their affinity to Islam, is making a lot more sense. It looks like this is not a new thing that has happened over the last 10 years, but something that has been a long time in the making. So everything is starting to make sense, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely agree. The relationship between Fabian Society and Islam, to go back 150 years, is quite something to see. I mean, I knew that there were issues, but the research you've done on this, Lloyd, is commendable. Fair play to you. No one, see, again, you should get more subscribers than you have at the moment, because no one does the work that you do. It's same old regurgitated adult jokes and other channels. But to understand what's going on in the world, particularly countries that are secular, people need to know the environment that they're living in order to make the best decisions. Thank you, Lloyd.
Welcome. Guys, we can do something. We can just talk about this. Look, 5 years ago, I spoke about the Sharia. No one knew what it was. I was on the fringes, on the outskirts. Now everyone's talking about the Sharia. They may not have every single detail, but people are aware of it now. It's percolated through. There were things that we spoke about, things like the pagan elements within Islam, its pagan roots, the pagan aspects of it. That was an unpopular theory 5 years ago. Now people are openly discussing it. Archaeology is supporting. People are starting to look at the evidence. The question has been broached in public, in academia. So we do make, it might take time, but we do make a difference. Just talk about it. Before they silence you forever, just talk about it. You'd be surprised how that changes. Remember, I spoke to you about totalism and this view of this perfect, what do they call it? You've got this a purism. You've got this purity. Imagine this white little bowl of milk, and someone takes a drop of black ink and puts it in there. They can't unsee that black drop. They'll ignore all of that white and they'll see the black drop. Be the black drop. Be the person talking. Ask the questions, raise it. And these ideas percolate, and it changes society for the better eventually. Bring attention to this. Put light on these cockroaches. Any thoughts, guys? Any further thoughts?
Yeah, I'll say something that Thunderous had actually said before in other shows, which is it seems like the timeline is speeding up. It looks like people talking about these things, the same with Islam, has made people, perhaps in the deep state, to having to do things more quickly, because they realize that now the time is running out, because people are finding out these things, which 10 years ago it was impossible. So time is of the essence. So for people watching, if you have friends in the UK or enemies even, make sure that you actually share these things to them, because something is going to happen, and it's very likely to happen over there. So it's better to be prepared.
Yeah. Guys, if you'd like a copy of this presentation, let me know. I'll make it available on my store. I know I don't show a lot of stuff here. But I'll make it available for a few dollars. If you guys would like a couple of dollars, you can buy it. if you want it, let me know so you can have the material with you to hand. I'll publish it. You can get it. And yeah, but remember, knowledge is power, right? You have the information now. You can talk about this. And I think we all know after COVID, everyone knows there's something very wrong, okay? And before they tell you 2 weeks to slow the spread, you can talk to people and say, do you know what kind of people are making up that kind of nonsense? Let's talk about their little deviances and some of the fans that people they think are amazing. So yeah, guys, that's it from me. Wow, thank you, Optimus Prince. Thank you. $4.99. Thank you very much. Thank you for your work, gentlemen. You're very welcome. Yeah, so South Africa has fallen apart. I mean, South Africa, it's really sad. It's really sad what's happened in my own country. So it's unfortunate. I mean, we can always hope. You know what's crazy? You know something? You look at Orania. Orania is the state where it's an Afrikaner-only village, right? Or small little town, effectively. So some Afrikaners bought private land and they created a little place for themselves. And the whole idea is they would be self-sufficient. They would do all of the construction themselves. They would raise all the finances themselves. They would do everything. No imported labor, no cheap labor. And only if you're an Afrikaner can you live there. And only if you're an Afrikaner, they need to approve you, right? Anyone can go visit. It's a great place. Everyone loves it. But these are whites who've, from nothing, from scratch, built a fantastic place that is free of crime, that functions, that is highly efficient and effective. Very moral, very Christian, these people, right? And then these blacks all claim, these tribal blacks, all claim that we built America, we built the UK, you built it on our black, right? And claim you built it on our back. And then you tell them, okay, you guys go off and build a country, go build a city, go build a clean. No, they can't. You know they can't. You know how bad they are at it. You know it's going to be filthy, dirty, and crime-ridden. It's going to be a war zone. You know this. They can't. They've got there is nothing in their history that shows that they can, even long before they encountered white people. So yeah. So guys, yeah, I'll leave it at that. So thanks, guys. Looking forward to the next one. I should be back tomorrow with JC, and we'll be talking about monotheism, about the pagan roots of Islam. All right, Tex, thank you very much. So always interesting new material. Thank you very, very much. Really do appreciate it. Yeah, well, there's that. Yeah, the coloreds like me, but yeah, the communists. Yeah, but look, we are more British we're very European and very British from a cultural point of view. You know, so there's that. So guys, thank you. Wow, nice comment here. Bruce Wayne says, salute you, Lloyd, for bringing topics that have never been talked or discussed openly, which is why my channel is suppressed, which is why I get throttled by YouTube. The things I say, you know, the algorithm doesn't like them. So please talk about them, share it, do like it, and thanks for all the support.